The movie starts with Count Istvan visiting the grave of the late Countess Ursibit. He recounts the time back when she was alive. Ursibit was born in 1560 in Hungary. Her dad was an important army leader. She had her marriage set when she was just born. While being baptized, her family already decided she would marry Count Nadasti. Throughout her early childhood, her mom taught her to be cruel and curious about the world. People could see these stark traits in her, especially when her father died. She didn't feel sad nor cry, and even touched the corpse of her late father without fear. Once, after learning about how small seeds grow to be big trees, she tried to grow a chick in a pot, thinking it would become huge, but eventually found the poor animal rotting in the pot. Afterwards, her teacher explained that only seeds grow in dirt, not animals or people. One other time, when she was young, she went to a baby boy's baptism and expressed her desire to marry him someday. But her mom said no, as they were too far apart in age, and she had to marry Nadasti. Later in young adulthood, Ursibit fell in love with a poor peasant boy and got pregnant. After her mom found out, she took the poor boy's life and even made Ursibit watch his execution. The girl was then locked in a room so no one would find out that she was expecting a baby. When her baby was born, her mom gave the child away, despite Ursibit's wishes to keep the baby. At the age of 15, Ursibit married Nadasti, and soon after, her mother passed away. Over time, Ursibit matures into a wise countess. She adeptly manages her estate, accumulating wealth to the extent that nobles, and even the king, owe her and her husband money. As time goes on, Ursibit and Nadasti have 3 children, a pair of daughters and a son. Yet their time together remains limited, as Nadasti becomes deeply engrossed in a war against the Turkish army. This war inflicts immense suffering, with almost half of Hungary's population falling victim to slaughter and enslavement in less than 50 years. As the years progress, Ursibit undertakes a noble endeavor by establishing a hospital for the less fortunate. However, many patients who enter never emerge alive, causing a sense of unease among the townspeople. Ursibit holds unconventional beliefs as a Protestant and entertains ideas deemed heretical. She employs a woman rumored to be a witch, assisting in the management of her wealth. These rumors even extend to the point where people speculate that she possesses the knowledge to transmute materials into gold. With Nadasti's formidable military skills and Ursibit's astuteness, they form a potent duo, gaining a reputation as the most feared, respected, and influential family within the kingdom. Following a fierce clash against the Turks, Nadasti returns to Vienna, pressing the king for the overdue payment. Regrettably, the king fibs, claiming that the funds are being readied, though they fall short. The king asks the man to wait a few days as they prepare the money, but Nadasti's patience wears thin. He entrusts the king's men to follow up on the payment before departing the king's castle. Just as Nadasti and his men are about to leave, the king's attendant gives him a golden chalice as a gift from his majesty. Although he takes the chalice, he jokingly remarks that the king is so indebted to him that he should have gotten him the golden grail. Meanwhile, on the other side, Ursibit enjoys playful moments with her children amidst the forest. As soon as the children's father arrives, their excitement is palpable. They run to their father. Ursibit asks all the workers and servants to leave as she enters the room where her husband sits. The man kisses his children and gives them a caged bird. They happily take it and run out. However, Nadasti soon strangely falls sick. He drinks from the chalice that the king gifted while coughing. His wife checks him and finds him burning up. Despite her best efforts, the man soon tragically succumbs to the illness on the very same day. The following morning, Ursibit attends her husband's funeral ceremony held at the local church. During the ceremony, she notices a strange fly coming out of her husband's nose and flying away. Afterwards, Ursibit decides to travel to Vienna with her children, leaving Countess under the management of the witch. In Vienna, she engages in discussions with the king concerning the rightful ownership of her husband's army and the Countess estate. After some negotiation, the king ultimately acknowledges her claims. Following this success, Ursibit finally visits her aunt's mansion to leave her children in her care. There, at night, they enjoy a lighthearted dinner with the nobles. She and her aunt engage in conversation, and a bishop at the table keeps pestering Ursibit about her wealth and her inferiority as a woman, but the countess eventually shuts the man up. After dinner, Count Georgi accompanies Ursibit outside and proposes marriage to her. However, the woman declines, saying that such a union would be socially unsuitable as she is of noble birth, while Count Georgi's title stems from marriage. As they converse, her aunt quickly interrupts the scene and whisks Ursibit away to a nighttime ball, where they both partake in the festivities. As the count leaves, her aunt expresses her displeasure towards him and begs her not marry the man. She even jokingly argues that he has poor fashion sense, since he still wears last year's dresses. At the ball, Ursibit crosses paths with Georgi's 21-year-old son, Istvan, and immediately takes a liking to him. They make eye contact a few times before her aunt introduces them. After conversing for a bit, they gracefully dance together until the music ends and a fiery passion begins to simmer in their hearts. After the dance, Ursibit comes to sit with her aunt and confesses her liking towards Istvan. Her aunt asks her if she will have an affair, and when Ursibit falters, she urges her to do so. The woman immediately becomes ecstatic, then goes back to the young man and they share a passionate kiss. Later, when Istvan prepares to depart for home, Ursibit invites him to stay with her and they spend an intimate night together. The next morning, Ursibit tenderly touches Istvan's youthful skin, but quickly withdraws her hand as her own aging skin seems inferior and reminds her of the passage of time. She begins to feel uneasy about her old aging skin. That day, Ursibit plans to return back to home, and before leaving, Istvan gives her a necklace. He also promises to write her letters. During her ride home, she looks uneasily at her skin and quickly wears her gloves to hide it. For the first time, Ursibit feels a blend of love and desire, filling the void within her heart. Returning to Countess, she recounts her encounters with Istvan to the witch. However, Darvulia cautions her that young men like Istvan, driven by hormones, often change their affections, casting doubt in her mind about his true feelings for her. Ursibit becomes angry and asks her to leave. Now all alone in her room, Ursibit stares at her reflection in the mirror, sighing at how time pays little heed to beauty. Soon, a letter from Istvan arrives and the woman instantly becomes happy. Before long, they meet again and spend another intimate time together. Istvan reveals his impending marriage to a baroness from Denmark and expresses his revulsion at the marriage. Ursibit urges him to marry and have children, but remain as her lover too. Soon Istvan falls asleep. As he is lying asleep, Ursibit cuts a strand of his hair and inhales its scent, a moment of strange longing. She then keeps the strand with her. A week later, Ursibit visits the church to offer her prayers. There, she passionately expresses her love and happiness, feelings that she only feels when she is in Istvan's company. As she is praying, the priest comes in and offers his condolences for her husband's demise. He mistakenly thinks that she is talking about her husband. The priest also expresses his gratitude for her generous donations, and she humbly responds, acknowledging that it's right to give back when blessed by God. Outside the church, Ursibit worriedly waits for Istvan's letter. During the wait, a young beggar admires her dress, prompting Ursibit to give her a golden ribbon. She smiles kindly as she gives the ribbon to the little girl. Back at home, she asks Darvulia to bind her to Istvan as she cannot bear to part with him. The woman thinks that their relationship is falling apart. Although the witch agrees, she also warns her that what she wishes for might bring her calamity. In return, Darvulia asks her to spend the nights with her. Finally, the next day, Ursibit receives Istvan's letter and calms down. She smiles, thinking that she worried for nothing, as it was the messenger who was delayed. In the letter, he is inviting her to a ball, being in a week. She decides to leave the next day, and Darvulia is sad to see her leave so soon. Once there, she eagerly attends the event and anxiously waits. But Istvan is nowhere to be found. As she lingers lonely by the side, Count Dominic approaches her and strikes up a conversation, but Ursibit's lack of interest is palpable. In the middle of their exchange, a servant interrupts, informing her that some noble is looking for her. Ursibit happily follows the servant and is briefly reunited with Istvan. Their time together is short, but Istvan promises that he would elope with her the next day to her castle because he wishes to stay with her. The woman gets a little uneasy and asks if he still loves her. He assures her that he loves her and his feelings would never change. With a gentle farewell, they leave the ball. The following day takes an unexpected turn for Ursibit. Waiting until sunset, she realizes Istvan has stood her up. Disheartened, she leaves him a letter expressing her disappointment and pain. She thinks that young people often change their minds, and perhaps he has a change of mind too. Little does she know that that is not the case. It turns out that Count Georgi has confined Istvan in a cellar after discovering his plan to escape with Ursibit. Georgi believes that Istvan is nothing but yet another pawn in Ursibit's manipulative game, while Istvan firmly believes in Ursibit's love for him, defying his father's wishes for him to travel to Denmark to meet his future bride. Istvan clings to the belief that Ursibit still cares for him, unaware of Georgi's cunning scheme. In the present, Istvan narrates that after he and Ursibit had to go their separate ways, he didn't really know much about her directly. He only heard about her from other people. Following their separation, his marriage was arranged by his father to a wealthy Danish trader's daughter against his will. But a year later, when Istvan's father was about to pass away, he decided to tell his son about the real truth regarding Ursibit. Unfortunately, Istvan couldn't hear his father well because his father was barely able to utter a few words during his distress. Istvan only heard enough for him to understand that what people thought about Ursibit wasn't entirely true. Returning to the past, Ursibit continues her wait for Istvan's return, but he never comes. However, Dominic keeps bothering her and doesn't give up. Eventually, she agrees to go with him. They ride horses and talk while they travel. She asks him about the rumor surrounding his family, about them not going out in the sun and eating newborn. The man chuckles and tells her that it is due to a skin condition, although he assures her that they certainly do not eat newborns nevertheless. Along the way, they meet an old beggar. When Ursibit criticizes the beggar's appearance, the beggar responds by saying that someday Ursibit will also get old. This makes Ursibit very angry. Dominic urges her to not let the beggar go. She punishes the poor old woman in front of everyone. When she goes back home, she's in a bad mood. She tries to find comfort by smelling Istvan's hair and talking to God, asking why her true love disappeared so suddenly. That night, because of her strong emotions, she does something extreme. She makes a on one side of her chest near her heart, puts Istvan's hairs inside, and carefully stitches it close. Perhaps she wishes to keep him in her heart forever. This shows exactly how much she longs for him, wanting a connection that lasts forever. The things people do for love. 3 weeks drift by, and Ursibit falls sick due to the agony of her broken heart, or perhaps it was her savage act of sewing up hairs inside her skin. Anyway, the news about Ursibit's situation reaches Count Georgi, who is visibly happy at her ailment. He wishes to prove that Ursibit is a foul and crazy madwoman. Later, Ursibit gets a letter from Istvan. However, it's a farewell letter, one where he talks about his love for his new wife. This makes Ursibit livid, but her attendant witch manages to calm her down. She tells her to let go of her feelings for Istvan. Ursibit thinks their age difference caused their relationship to end. She even compares herself to the young maid in her room, saying that she is prettier than her and has smooth skin. Anybody would choose the maid over her old aging self. Meanwhile, Dominic visits Ursibit. While they're eating, a servant accidentally spills the wine and Ursibit gets extremely mad. She wants to punish the servant and hits him with a belt, but Dominic stops her. Instead, he offers himself for her to take out her anger on, so she hits him with a belt. The man strangely enjoys the pain, a masochist. He asks her to keep him, as he wishes to be her servant, but Ursibit brushes him off, telling him she wants to be alone. The next day, Ursibit is sad again. She looks at her reflection in the mirror and laments at how ugly she is becoming day by day, how her skin is becoming wrinkly, and how old she looks. She then remembers the old lady that she hit a few weeks back at the park and believes that a curse from her has befallen her. She thinks the curse has made her old and wrinkled. She's even frustrated with the witch, blaming her for giving her ineffective ointment, and aggressively shouts at the woman to make something for her that works. Moments later, she calms down a bit and orders her young maid from the previous day to tend to her hair. The poor girl accidentally pulls Ursibit's hair too forcefully. This triggers Ursibit's anger once more, leading her to violently strike the maid with the hairbrush, causing the maid's blood to splatter onto her face. As Ursibit wipes the blood away before a mirror, something extraordinary seems to transpire before her eyes. Her wrinkled face appears to glow and rejuvenate as if she is becoming younger. This transformation makes hope blossom in her cold heart. In reality, what Ursibit perceives in the mirror as a radiant, youthful transformation is a mere illusion, but for the desperate heart, any ray of light would do. Soon she becomes steadfast in her belief that bathing in the blood of a virgin can grant her eternal youth and beauty. Her devoted servants, eager to please her, reinforce this belief and insist that the blood's effects are indeed miraculous. However, Darvulia holds a different stance, cautioning against this gruesome practice. Turns out, she really cares for the Countess. But Ursibit remains undeterred, continuing to extract blood from the healing wound of the young virgin maid. When the maid's wound eventually heals completely, Ursibit orders her servant to inflict fresh cuts to extract more blood. Tragically, the maid succumbs to blood loss after multiple sessions of this horrific ordeal. With insatiable desire, Ursibit commands her servants to capture more virgin maids and young women from the town. These unfortunate prisoners meet their end inside a cage that has sharp spikes. The spikes are made to go through their bodies in a way that causes as little bleeding as possible, following Ursibit's evil plans. Darvulia tries to stop her again, but she doesn't listen to her, asking the witch to leave and never come back if she doesn't want her life to be taken away. In the meantime, Istvan writes numerous letters to Ursibit, but he never receives any response. Perhaps someone is tampering with his letters without his knowledge. He assumes that she is engrossed in the war effort and remains unaware of her sinister actions and malevolent pursuits. He eventually stops writing after confirming that she is having an affair with Dominic. On the other side, Dominic spends a night with Ursibit. While she is sleeping, Dominic moves around the castle, looking for who knows what. But Darvulia stops his nighttime wandering. She warns him against doing anything fishy, or else he wouldn't be safe, but he retorts back by saying that since he is the Countess's favorite these days, perhaps it is Darvulia that should beware. Even though Darvulia worries about how Ursibit is changing and what she wants, she still stays watchful and protects Ursibit from ambitious people like Dominic. Years pass, and the estate becomes marred by collective demise, causing fear among the villagers. They find the bodies of young women in the woods, making them think something evil is around. There are so many people losing their lives that they can't bury everyone properly. The woods become a terrible place with rotting bodies attracting wolves and flies. Ursibit carefully writes about every life she takes in her journal. She also mentions that she can't tolerate the blood of common people on her skin, because lately it has been giving her rashes. While she's busy writing, one of her maids arrives, telling her that Darvulia is sick and wants to be with Ursibit, but she blatantly refuses. Meanwhile, the townspeople start suspecting Ursibit of the murders and tell the priest. They think she's doing these awful things. That night, the priest sends a messenger with a letter to the king. He himself then tries to escape with money that was given to him. Sadly, the king's attendant, who also plots with Georgi, catches the messenger and accuses the priest of being disloyal to the Countess. He orders his men to chase the messenger, and he himself ends up taking the poor priest's life. On the other hand, the sick witch remains lonely in her room. She begins writing a letter to Ursibit. During that same night, Dominic, having once again spent the night with Ursibit, gets up to search around. He sees her newly written pages and secretly sneaks into her torture basement. There, he discovers the torture tools, along with Ursibit's crucial journal, a piece of incriminating evidence. As Ursibit awakens, she sees the bed empty and enters the torture chamber. There, her servant rushes in a state of panic. The servant relays the news that Dominic has fled with the journal and that Darvulia has passed away, leaving a letter for her. The following day, Ursibit reads the final letter from the witch. The letter talks about love and how beauty doesn't last forever. These words touch Ursibit, and she decides to go to Vienna to see her children. But when she tries to leave in her fancy coach, the townspeople surround it and call her a witch. She can't continue her journey, so she goes back to her castle. There, she writes to the general to send her a group of soldiers so that they may be protected. Back at the castle, Ursibit suffers from the effects of not having enough blood, so her servants bring a young girl to her that night. She recognizes the young girl as the same beggar from before, identified by the golden ribbon she had given her. Ursibit grabs the girl's arms and tells her to leave, or she'll lose her life. The terrified beggar girl runs away from the castle, but sadly, she meets a terrible fate in the woods at the hands of Dominic. Dominic has been working closely with Georgi and receives money from him. On the other side, Jonas, Ursibit's servant, finally returns with two nobles in tow. Surprisingly, one of them is Istvan's wife. Strangely, the woman says she hasn't seen him for years. Angry and going against her usual ways, Ursibit takes the woman's life by cutting her throat. In the meantime, Georgi takes Ursibit's children and her aunt to witness the mutilated body of the young beggar, alleging that Ursibit herself committed the gruesome act. The next day, in the king's court, a messenger arrives who informs him that peasants from the Countess estate arrived in Vienna to address Ursibit's torturous murders, including those of a priest, maidens, and aristocrats. The king initially displays little interest in resolving these accusations, until his servant tells him about the potential benefits of proving Ursibit guilty of witchcraft. Such a revelation would absolve the king of his debts to her, and allow him to seize her estate. His subjects' problems have zero effect on him, but the promise of treasure sure does please the king. He quickly signs the verdict and gives the order for investigations. The king's attendant, who works with Georgi, overhears this conversation and approaches Georgi's office. Inside are Dominic, Georgi, and his son, Istvan. The attendant promptly informs Georgi that the king has caught wind of the suspicions surrounding Ursibit's murders and witchcraft. Georgi devises an alternative strategy, permitting Ursibit's children to sign an agreement. This agreement allows the court to charge their mother with murder, while omitting any reference to witchcraft. In exchange, they would be entitled to inherit Countess Castle, while the rest of the estate and military would be ceded to Georgi. Though this arrangement may seem unjust, it effectively leaves Ursibit with little choice but to accept for the sake of her children's well-being. Rejecting the deal could result in the king confiscating everything from her and her children. Georgi sends the king's assistant and Istvan with the agreement letter, because he knows that the Countess would be weak in front of him. As they go, Istvan is still not convinced that Ursibit could commit such crimes and demands to check if the accusations are true. Istvan and the assistant arrives, and Ursibit welcomes them with a nice dinner but accompanied by a lot of flies. They don't know that the flies bothering them during the meal are coming from the hidden corpses within the castle. After 5 years of separation, Ursibit and Istvan finally meet again. The Countess is filled with joy at his sight. She yearns for a private moment with Istvan. Ursibit talks to him about his letter in which he said he loved the Baroness of Denmark. But Istvan strongly denies writing that letter. He realizes that his father made that up. They then have an intimate moment together. When Ursibit falls asleep, Istvan gets up and leaves with the king's assistant to search Countess Castle for evidence of her crimes. As he goes, a sad tear drops down Ursibit's eye as all her suspicions are confirmed. She might be deeply in love, but the woman is still sharp as ever. Nevertheless, she does not stop the duo from investigating and accepts her fate at the hands of the man she loves. The duo uncover her terrible torture room and a room full of rotting bodies. Shortly after, Ursibit and her servants are put on trial for mass slaughter. Her loyal servants are executed quickly. Meanwhile, Ursibit is sentenced to a lifetime confinement in her room with all the windows sealed shut and only a small hole left open for food and water. Ursibit is made to sign an agreement to give away her things to Georgi, let her kids have the castle, and free the king from the debt he owes her. Before being entombed within her chamber as punishment, Ursibit makes remarks on Georgi's masterful orchestration, his scheme to amass wealth. Knowing her end is near, Ursibit maintains her sanity, contrasting it with how Georgi portrayed her as crazy to others. Locked in a walled-up chamber, her suffering gets worse. She wonders why men who murder are celebrated, while she, a woman who did the same, is imprisoned. She prays for forgiveness, she prays for redemption, and eventually, with all hope lost, she loses her faith in God too. In her solitary agony, the pain becomes unbearable, so she by biting. She is found lifeless weeks later, and doesn't even get a proper burial. From the most powerful woman in the country, she becomes a nameless nobody. Back to the present, Istvan leaves Ursibit's grave and wonders if the accusations of her being a demon and slaughterer are true, or if his own father made them up. As he thinks about Ursibit Bathory's mysterious legacy, the truth stays hidden in history's mist.